What's going on, guys? Andrew of New Art Gaming back here today to talk about some more Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains, and today we're going to be reviewing episode 69, where we finally see our conflict that we've been building to for the past many episodes start to come to the point where we can fully understand the direction they want to go, in that we are now seeing Revolver, representing the Knights of Hanoi, dueling against the AIs, representing, well, the AIs, I guess, and then you've got Playmaker and who are basically imprisoned and stuck basically spectating this duel just to see what's happening as they're watching these two sides clash, and they are literally in the middle of the field, which just goes to show how in the middle they are of the conflict to begin with. They're seeking coexistence, whereas the other two sides are seeking to destroy one another, and I just love the idea of this three-sided conflict. It's something I don't think Yu-Gi-Oh! Does a lot, but I think normally when they do it, it usually ends up going pretty darn well, such as what we sort of had during the Barry and Onslaught arc with Yuma, in that he was trying to find some peace, whereas there were also the Barians and there was Don Thousand, and it was just kind of this multifaceted affair where there wasn't necessarily a clear, pure antagonist until we got Don Thousand, but there was a lot of conflict going on, and there were kind of layers to what was happening, and I think we could definitely end up seeing that happen here as well. Maybe we will see Revolver develop like a little bit of a soft side towards maybe as if, you know, Yusaku helps him once or twice, or maybe we'll see one of the Ignises develop a soft side towards Yusaku or something along those lines, something just to add some more depth to what's going on that I think usually is achieved better having these multiple groups rather than a two-sided conflict, which oftentimes can be a little bit more limited in that field, though don't get me wrong, it can still be done very well. So anyway, diving into the duel itself, I thought it was really interesting to watch Revolver and Windy start going at it, because up to this point, when Revolver's been dueling everybody, except for a little bit with Playmaker, he's generally been far more skilled than they have at out-predicting his opponent, managing to anticipate their strategies and essentially make them feel they're in the winning position, only for them to realize they were playing into his hands the whole time. Well, essentially, Revolver's watched that entire thing spin on its head, and he's basically been playing into Windy's hand this whole time with the duel, and watched his own cards literally be turned against him, especially in the case of Magic Cylinder. Speaking of Magic Cylinder, that seems to be another throwback to the original anime, which I think is kind of cool that they're doing that to appeal to those of us that have been with the show since the beginning, especially considering cards like Magic Cylinder and the other time that they did this, Mirror Force, have been pretty much irrelevant to the card game for a really long time now. Now back to the topic of the duel, if you're like me and you are still holding on to those really small threads of hope that maybe there will be a twist and Revolver might still be somehow tied to an Ignis, since he is one of our main cast members and he was around during the Lost incident, I think you could maybe make a little bit of a case for maybe it being Windy, given how their dueling styles do seem to reflect one another a lot in terms of this sort of bait and switch type of tactic almost, and that they do have a lot of power when they attack, and they're extremely calm, cool, and collected during the duel, very, very confident. They'll be shaken for a split second, but then are immediately back to their sense of focus. So I think if you were going to make that case, which I'm not really anymore, unfortunately, I thought that was good. That could be a really cool plot device if we later figure out Revolver was tied to an AI, and then maybe they had a falling out, or maybe he was in a weird spot trying to choose between the AI who he had a bond with, similar to Yusaku and I did, and his father's dream, which was to destroy the AIs. I thought that could have been a really cool plot element, but like I'm saying, it's not very likely we're going to head that direction. But if you are trying to make the argument, I can see a little bit of a case for Windy at least. Okay, so moving on from that, we did get some nice dialogue between Windy and Revolver towards the beginning of the duel, and that's about Dr. Kogami's dream. Revolver was sort of acting to represent the later half of Dr. Kogami's life, when he felt like he had made a mistake going through the Lost Incident and creating these AIs that were supposed to be humanity's successor, whereas Windy was representing a younger Dr. Kogami who believed that the AIs were going to be humanity's successor, and that he was creating a way for life to continue to press forward in its own right. And so you see kind of this embodiment of the idea of how do you remember someone who's gone? Do you remember them by their largest achievement, which in the case of Dr. Kogami would end up being something like the Lost Incident where he created all the AIs? Would you remember them by what their morals were at the end of their life, like what Revolver's doing and how he's trying to destroy the Ignises at any cost? Or would you remember them by something of the bigger picture? Regardless, I think it's a cool topic to get at, and how they are sort of both representing the two sides of the same person, if you will, and it seems to almost embody the conflict Kogami probably felt within himself at times, in that he created what he believed to be his own worst enemy, but there probably were still pieces within him that also felt like what he created wasn't entirely a bad idea. Now, speaking of interesting character dialogues, we also got some nice stuff between Playmaker and Revolver right before this duel began, when Playmaker was trying trying to appeal to Revolver and be like, hey, look, man, we don't have to fight. Coexistence is a much better idea. We can mutually benefit. And even your father said that it's humanity that's the issue here. If we act aggressively towards them, then they will retaliate, and that's not a fight we can win. And basically, Yusaku also goes on to say, if you hold on to the vengefulness and spitefulness that is left over from your past, you'll never be able to move forward. And Revolver actually turns that on its table and is like, the only reason you ever came after me is because of that. You have no room to speak. Which I think gets at one of the more interesting points, and dynamics between those two characters that we had since the very beginning of the show, and that to a large extent they were sort of like foils to one another. They kind of were on two opposite sides of the conflict, but a lot of the reasons they were pursuing their goals were the same thing. Yusaku was after information about the Lost incident, right? And he was seeking revenge on the Knights of Hanoi for essentially ruining his life. Revolver was coming from the other side of the Lost incident. He was trying to clean up what he believed to be the mess that his father made, and managed to make it so that this conflict, this potential hazard in the AIs, was not going to be there anymore. And regardless, they were both strung up to this past that was dark and negative, and being a very shadowy force that was preventing them from really moving on from where they had been 10 years ago when the Lost incident had even occurred. So with that being the case, we see these two characters that in some ways really understand each other, and I think that's why you're able to see Revolver and Playmaker have these kind of calm but somewhat tense dialogues between one another, because they see themselves in each other, and I think that's the reason that Playmaker doesn't seem to entirely hate Revolver and does appeal to him rather than try to be aggressive towards him or anything like that. I mean, on top of the fact that he's imprisoned and Revolver may be his only hope of escape at this point, but still. And Revolver sort of mirrors that to Playmaker. He even kind of indirectly states to Playmaker, I'll crush you if you get in my way, but if you don't, he kind of implies that there's no hard feelings there. And I think that's because there is sort of this, they see each other, or they see themselves in one another type of attitude, which I think is a nice thing to see in the rival dynamic, and it's not something we've necessarily seen before in Yu-Gi-Oh! If you look at Yugi and Kaipo, they were very much opposites. I mean, they had similar interests in being both very good at dueling, and they often found themselves on the same side of a conflict, but in terms of personality and what was driving them, that was rarely the same. Then if you look at Jaden and Zane, or any of his many rivals from GX, because he had a ton of them, Jaden wasn't similar to many of them, if any of them. I mean, the closest one would probably be Jesse, but I would argue Jesse more so filled in the best friend role. Then if you move on to 5Ds, Yusei and Jack Atlas were not necessarily connected by that same sort of drive and had that same sort of attitude towards their past that was chaining them down to what had already happened in their life. Same deal goes for Zexal and then Arc 5. So with that being the case, I just think it touched on some interesting points. I do still have my issues with Revolver as a character that I've expressed in a couple of previous videos, and I don't find him to be as interesting as he potentially could be, but I do think that was one of the better things they got at in Season 1. And then moving along from that, another cool piece of dialogue we got between Revolver and Playmaker in this episode is Revolver says he regrets having taught Yusaku how to coexist with the AIs. Now, I'm guessing he means one of two things by that. It could be one, when he gave his 1, 2, 3 speech to Yusaku to give him hope to get through the Lost incident, or it could be by forcing the Ignis and Yusaku onto the same side of the conflict. When Yusaku was pursuing the Knights of Hanoi and needed a reason for them to come out and attack him, he forced Yusaku to learn to coexist with the AI because they had to work together to achieve the same dream. Regardless, Revolver says that he regrets that, and it seems like Revolver is still, to me, when you're getting that kind of dialogue from a character that is a main antagonist, it very much strikes me as a case of he's developing a little bit of a soft spot for Playmaker, and he's overcompensating and saying that he regrets that to show that that soft side's not really there. I'm still the, singularly focused type of character that I am. And I think he also has to convince himself that he regrets that, because in AI and Yusaku, you do see a pretty strong coexistence between humanity and the Ignises, and I think if Revolver allowed himself to be okay with that, to feel good about having united Yusaku and the Ignis in a peaceful manner, then I think he would have to face a lot of internal conflict that he may be burying right now about pursuing his father's goals of destroying the Ignises. I still believe at some point or another we are going to see Revolver come around and not be the straight up pseudo antagonist that he's been up to this point, or in the case of season 1, straight up antagonist that he was up till this point. So with that being said, let's go ahead and turn our focus to something else, and that while I still expressed in my last video that I made about synchro summoning maybe coming up in Vrains that I had some doubts about it happening, the way the preview for the next episode ended at this one, with everybody kind of having these shocked expressions at Revolver's change in tactics, very much strikes me as we're basically confirmed to be getting synchros at this point. The same way Revolver talked about Yusaku having advanced his dueling and it having evolved when he saw that Yusaku had fusion summoned in that episode where Hanoi, I believe it was titled Hanoi Returns, when he was kind of gathering his squad back up to go after the Ignises. Yusaku speaks in the exact same manner in this episode preview, having talked about how Revolver's dueling has evolved and how he wouldn't show up into this layer completely unprepared. Very much hints at Revolver's changing something up, and that he's also advanced his dueling. He's come with a bit of a secret weapon to the table, and given how we haven't seen synchro summoning at all in the show, it fits the bill perfectly for what we're waiting for. So I would imagine at this point we basically got to confirm that's definitely going to appear. So very excited to see that, mix that with the episode title and the cards being released and everything else that we've covered about the synchro summoning. I think at this point it's fair to assume, yeah, we're getting it. So then let's hit on a couple other small points from this episode. We also got some flashes to the Knights of Hanoi battling these AI bodies or avatars, like the one that Windy's having hold him during the duel, and I thought it was just really kind of spoke to how poorly most of the Knights of Hanoi were introduced in season 1, that we had all of them except for Spectre only tackling one of these enemies at once, whereas Spectre's dueling 4 of the avatars and absolutely destroying them. I think it's a great testament to the fact that they handled Spectre really well, and that they are still kind of showing that he's strong, he's important to the show, and probably that they intend to do more with him yet, whereas these others are still relatively minor background characters. So I thought that was funny to watch, and I appreciate the fact that they're at least keeping things consistent there in terms of Spectre being a really strong duelist. And that brings us to kind of my last point, in that we were shown a brief glimpse in this episode of Soulburner and Flame entering into the area where that Windy has created, this AI space where the duels have been going on between the Ignises, the Avatars, the Knights of Hanoi, Revolver, and Windy. So with that being the case, it makes you wonder what's going to happen with that. Flame, for example, he mentions when he and Soulburner are still within the real world that he wants to trust Windy, whereas Soulburner doesn't, right? So it makes you wonder what's really going to happen with Flame when he ends up encountering Windy. Is Windy going to be able to twist Flame's opinion? Is he going to stick with Soulburner? Where is I going to fall in all of this? Is he going to try and twist Flame to, or not twist Flame, but explain to Flame what's going on and explain, hey, coexistence is a good thing? Because it seems to me at this point that maybe Flame might be a little bit too open to Windy's side. I don't think they're going to head that direction because they already have a lot going on with the various plot elements that they have right now, including the fact that we have Bowman and the bounty hunters and soul technology still all going on in the background, and we don't know where exactly they're going to fit in terms of these pieces of the puzzle. So we know they want information on the Ignises, they've been hunting them, but at the same time I don't think they necessarily want them destroyed in the same way the Knights of Hanoi do, and they probably still have grudges against the Knights of Hanoi, some of them. So there's kind of this complicated web already, so I think having Flame and Soulburner end up on opposite sides would make things very, very strange there. Now I do think we could get some graying of the sides there between Soulburner and Flame, where maybe they don't agree on everything, but they still work together for the most part. Similar to how we had some conflicts between Yuma and Astral sometimes in Zexal, where Astral was more clear about his goal and that he needed to manage to overcome the Baryons, and that there was a conflict with the Baryons, whereas Yuma was more like, no, coexistence is the way to go, and those types of things. So maybe we could see a little bit of that, and that they're still working together, but their perspectives on how things need to eventually unfold may slightly differ. And if they head that direction with Soulburner and Flame, I think we could end up watching it unfold like that for other characters as well, which could be really exciting to witness. It also makes me wonder if maybe, just maybe, this duel between Revolver and Windy is going to end up as a no result. I don't have a lot of evidence to back that up, but we do know for sure Soulburner is going to be coming into the next episode along with Flame, so I'd imagine imagine he's going to at least try and free Yusaku and either that or maybe he's going to get interrupted, be stuck dueling somebody. I personally think it would be really cool to watch Soulburner duel Spectre, because I think those characters are seen of equal relevance to the respective factions, so I think it would be kind of a toss-up as to who wins. Now granted, so far based on what we've seen, it would probably end up being Soulburner, but I think it would be at least possible for a twist there in the way that it's written that maybe Spectre wins if they end up facing each other, but I kind of doubt that for the next episode. Anyway, where I was going with that is I think there is a possibility for it to end up being a no result. We are at the beginning of a conflict here. They may want to leave us up into the air as to if Revolver really can defeat these AIs in a duel. So with all that being said, guys, that's going to about wrap up my thoughts on this episode. Be sure to let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Do you like the direction this is heading? Do you think it's going to be way too complicated with all these different sides and us being unsure as to where people fall in it? Or are you really excited to see the fact that they are kind of stretching the plot bounds, especially after season 1 that I would consider relatively predictable? Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below. If not, constructive criticism is always welcome, and I'll catch you guys next time.